Hello, dear students. I hope you're doing well. Welcome back to a new lecture. In this lecture, we're starting with a new reading lesson. So the essential question in this reading lesson is, what steps can people take to promote a healthier environment? So let's start here. Green means clean. What does that mean? Let's find out. It is used to be that a discussion about farming would focus on crops, plowing, rainfall, and fertilizer. But these days, farming could just as easily mean harvesting energy from the sun and from wind. So harvesting energy means getting energy, electrical energy, for example, from the sun and from the wind. So as you can see here, those systems are used for solar energy. Those change the energy of the sun to electrical energy. And here, those fans also change the energy of the wind that causes its motion, that causes this fan to move. This movement changes the wind energy into an electrical energy. So this way they are making or harvesting energy from what? From the nature. And they are staying green. They are saving the environment. They are causing no pollution. Let's read more. Unlike generators that burn the fossil fuels, so generators that burn the fuel and those generations would lead to gaseous emissions into the air and cause air pollution. Unlike those, so you remember in the last lesson, we studied compare and contrast. Here they are comparing and contrasting. Unlike the generators, which use fossil fuels and cause pollution, the solar farms and wind farms, as you can see here, solar farms and wind farms produce electricity without harmful emissions, so without leading to emissions, gaseous emissions to get into the environment and cause pollution. These farms are built where the terrain provides optimal conditions for gathering energy. Solar farms can be built on top of parking lots. Some wind turbines are even built out in the ocean. So you see the places where they can be built, in places where there is sun and there is sunlight and there is wind for them to be able to collect that energy. Advocates for farming energy, advocates means those who are supportive of it, who support it. So the advocates for farming energy from renewable sources say the benefits of generating clean electricity far outweigh any disadvantages. So this is a renewable source, which means this is a source that renews itself, that is there all the time, like from water, from sun. If we use the energy of the sun, we want, for example, not have sun the other day, sunlight, So this is a renewable energy. If we use the wind, there would still be wind there in nature. So those are sources of renewable energy. Those sources of renewable energy are more beneficial to gather clean electricity, which means electricity that would leave our environment clean and green and not cause pollution. So it has more advantages, more positive effects than any disadvantage. Okay? Now here you can talk about it. Write the words you have learned so far, new words you have learned here in this introduction about promoting clean energy sources. So how do we promote clean energy sources? And talk with a partner about how people's understanding of energy production is changing. So how did your understanding change of the energy production? We used to know that, for example, they use the generators and use fossil fuel to generate energy. Now you have another way of generating energy. So how did it change? Okay, moving on to the vocabulary words. As always, we are going to read the sentence and look at the picture to try to figure out the meaning of those vocabulary words. Okay, let's start with advocates. Advocates or an advocate. Advocates for safe neighborhoods fought to save their local firehouses. So again, advocates for a safe neighborhood. Some people are advocates for a safe neighborhood. So what did those advocates do? Because they are advocates of this, they fought to save their local firehouses. So an advocate is someone who supports a specific idea. Okay? Commonplace. It is commonplace for kids to play kickball during their free time. What's a commonplace homework assignment that you receive? So again, it is a commonplace for kids to play kickball during their free time. It is something common. It is something usual. It's something normal. It's a routine. That's what commonplace means, okay? Designate. Before starting the game, this team, before they start the game, they need to designate which teammate plays each position. So you have, for example, here, about 8 teammates, and they have designate which teammate will play which position. So to designate, to assign for each team member a specific role, a specific position. So each one would choose a position. That's what it means to designate, to assign. Now, initial. She suddenly realized that her initial response was incorrect. She suddenly realized that her initial response was incorrect. So her initial response means her very first response, her immediate response, okay? Now, insulation. Many birds have layers of soft inner feathers that provide natural insulation. So the feather of the birds provide them with natural insulation. What are some places where insulation is used in your home? So insulation means protection, shielding. The feather of the bird protects it, shields it, covers it. Okay, so it provides insulation. Invasive. Certain vines from foreign countries are considered invasive because they grow too quickly and cover up native plants. So those vines grow too quickly and cover native plants. That's why they're considered invasive. So invasive, like dangerous, they take over others, they affect others, they hurt others, okay? So try to answer this question. How might noise feel invasive, okay? As if it is taking over your privacy, taking something from you, harming you. Irrational. Many people have an irrational fear of the number 13, believing without proof that it brings bad luck. So irrational means not logical, not reasonable, nonsense. Okay, doesn't make sense. Optimal, often the optimal time for fishing is early in the morning. The optimal, the normal, the usual time for fishing, the best time for fishing, the ideal time for fishing. Okay, the finest time for fishing is in the morning. Okay, the optimal is the best, okay? Time for fishing, for example, is early in the morning. Describe a time when you experienced optimal conditions for a favorite activity. Now, you see, you say, for example, it's sunny, there's no wind, it is not so cold, so the weather is the optimal. Those are the optimal conditions for a favorite activity. So they're the best suitable conditions for a favorite activity. Now, pick 3 words and write 3 questions for your partner to answer, to practice using those vocabulary words. Now, as I have already introduced those vocabulary words here in worksheet 32, you have their definitions. We said an advocate is a person who publicly supports or recommends a particular cause or policy or whatever. So when you're an advocate of something means you support this publicly. You say it in front of everyone. Everyone knows that you are an advocate of it. You are a supporter. Commonplace, it's usual, ordinary. It's an everyday thing. It's a routine. It's common. to designate, to appoint someone to a specific group, to assign someone to a specific group, to decide on what each member would take or what position each member would take. Initial means existing or occurring at the beginning. It's the first thing to happen, the initial reaction, my first reaction, okay? The reaction that took place or occurred or existed at the beginning. Installation is the action of protecting or sheltering or shielding something else. Invasive, tending to spread very quickly and undesirably or harmfully, okay? Irrational, not logical or reasonable. It's not logical or not reasonable. Optimal means the best, the most favorable, the top, the greatest, the finest, the ideal. And then you have here the rest of the questions for the worksheet. Let's go back to our reading lesson and start with our reading. Is your city green? That's the title for our reading lesson. Is your city green? And remember, while reading this lesson and by the end of reading this lesson, you will be able to answer the question, what steps can people take to promote a healthier environment? So, read about different green solutions in the city of the future. Before we start, I want to remind you that the last reading lesson was an expository text, and this one is also an expository text. Before, we saw sequence of events in a specific order, and we were also able to compare and contrast between two different things. Here, we will focus on a different organization of an expository text or essay, which is problem and solution. So the problem would be pollution, causing pollution while generating energy. What would other solutions be in which we can follow to keep our city or our environment or our world green and clean and a healthier environment? So again, read about different green solutions in the city of the future. And when we say green solutions, this means solutions that would keep our nature green and healthy. Starting here. These days, people are trying to be better stewards or caretakers of Earth by living in a green way. Advocates of living in greener communities believe the advantages far outweigh any drawbacks. So again, the advocates of living in greener communities means the people who support living in greener communities. So people who want to live in a community where there are trees and it's not only buildings, okay? They think it is irrational, it's illogical, it's not reasonable to delay solving environmental problems. So we expect to see in this reading solutions for the environmental problems, for the pollution in the environment, for example. They say we can use ideas and technologies available right now to create the city of the future today. So we can use ideas and technologies that are available right now to create the city of the future today, the city I want to have in the future. We should start taking actions from today and solve the problems by taking solutions or by finding solutions and working on them. Starting with section number 2 or paragraph number 2 with the heading buildings with green roofs. And we already know in expository texts, we have headings for a paragraph. This heading is like a title for this paragraph that conveys the main idea. So they are going to talk about buildings that have green roofs. Modern buildings in the green city of the future are designed to save water and energy. Outdated buildings, which means the old buildings in comparison to modern buildings, outdated buildings of the past were not. So here you can compare and contrast between the modern buildings and the outdated buildings. Modern buildings in the green city of the future are designed to save the water and the energy. However, outdated buildings of the past were not designed to save water and energy. Rooftops covered with grass and other living plants provide insulation, protection that keeps the buildings cooler. So if you plant something on the roof of your building, those plants would keep your building cooler, okay? So it would provide insulation. These roofs can also collect, filter, and reuse rainwater that would otherwise be wasted. These roofs can also collect, filter, and reuse rainwater that would otherwise be wasted. So you see, here is one way building green roofs is a one solution to promote a healthier environment. Let's continue reading to look at other solutions. Clean energy. It is commonplace in the green city to use sources of energy that are renewable and cause no pollution. Okay? It is commonplace in the green city to use sources of energy that are renewable, like solar energy from the sun, wind energy from the wind, energy from the water, etc. And they cause no pollution. This is one solution, using renewable energy. Solar panels convert the sun's energy into electric power, the panels that you saw in the previous picture. The solar panels convert the sun energy into electric power. Huge turbines generate electricity by harvesting the wind's energy on nearby wind farms. Even rivers are harnessed to produce electricity. And geothermal energy, even rivers are harnessed to produce electricity, and geothermal energy from deep within Earth is used to heat homes. What you won't find in the city are gas stations on every corner. Tax breaks encourage people to use clean energy, and government agencies impose fees on the sale of fossil fuels to discourage their use. Again, all these are solutions that can promote using clean energy, hence keeping our environment healthier. Let's continue. Moving right along. Most people in the green city of the future designate mass transit as their preferred method of travel. Since passengers who have chosen to ride trains are not driving their cars, less fuel is burned. So, use other ways of traveling, transportation, instead of every person using a car and every person causing more emissions to the environment or to the air and causing air pollution. So this is another solution, a third solution. Any private cars still in use are hybrid or plug-in electric vehicles. Hybrid cars run on both fuel and batteries. The cars we use nowadays are hybrid cars. They run on both the fuel and the battery. Some electric cars do not use gas at all. So here we can also compare and contrast between hybrid cars and other cars. Now you will see. Now, we said some electric cars do not use gas at all. Instead, owners plug their cars into standard electrical outlets to charge the batteries. In the green city, many cars, trucks, and buses burn fuels made from renewable sources rather than oil. For example, a biofuel called ethanol is made from corn and sugar cane crops. Again, for example, a biofuel, so in comparison to the fuel, the benzene or any other fuel which we use in our car and they cause pollution, we can use biofuel from renewable sources. For example, the oil from the corn and sugarcane crops, okay? Or ethanol. Biodiesel is made from soybean oil, animal fat, or even cooking grease, okay? So here they are using renewable sources to use a fuel that can be used, give us energy, electricity, and at the same time, keep our environment green and clean and healthy with no pollution. So far we have three different solutions. planting plants on the roofs of the buildings, using renewable energy to create energy instead of generators, and also for transportation, using biofuel instead of the fuel that causes air pollution. Now, section number 4, open spaces. Citizens of the Green City understand that protecting native species is key to conserving natural spaces because native plants are original to the ecosystem. They provide the optimal habitat for local insects, birds, and other animals. Native plants that are well adapted to the local climate also require less water. Alien or imported plants are quickly identified and removed. Otherwise, they may become invasive and overwhelm local species. Okay, now they're comparing and contrasting between native plants that are adapted to the climate and alien or imported plants from another environment. Those plants would be invasive and overwhelm the local species. Residents recognize that a process called composting, what does it mean? Now you will see, helps reduce the amount of solid waste that is sent to landfills. It also increases the richness of local soil. People mix food scraps and yard waste with water and air in large bins. Helpful bacteria and fungi then break down this pile of garbage into an eco-friendly and economical fertilizer that improves the health of city parks and backyards. Okay, so this is also one way of using the garbage in a way that in which we are getting rid of this garbage in an eco-friendly way and turning it into an economical fertilizer that would improve the health of the parks and the backyards and the soil mainly. Okay. Now, what's the main idea of this text? It is using other ways, finding other ways, solutions to solve not mainly the problem of pollution, but to not cause pollution and to keep our environment healthy and green. So we can look for details in the text to support the main idea. Let's look at this example. Main idea, many choices reduce fuel use for transportation in the green city. How? They can use mass transit, like a bus. They can use private vehicles that are hybrid fuel electric, and they can also use renewable fuels. So those are 3 details to support the main idea, which is there are different choices to reduce fuel use for transportation in a green city. Okay, this is one solution. How to reduce fuel of transportation in a green city and keep it green and keep our environment healthy. We have a comprehension strategy, which we got introduced to before, which is called answer or ask and answer questions. When there is anything that we do not understand while reading, we ask ourselves a question and then we try to answer it. So when you reread an expository text, you can ask yourself questions about sections that were unclear to you the first time you read them. Looking in the text for the answers to your questions can help you understand the information. For example, here in buildings with green roofs, I asked myself why people would want a green roof. I read that a green roof saves water and energy by keeping the buildings cooler and reusing rainwater. Now I can infer from this that green roofs save money and protect the environment. So I asked myself a question, why do we need the green roofs? I continued reading and I found out, yeah, they are helpful, they solve problems, they keep our environment green. That's why we need green roofs. Okay, now we move on to our genre, which is expository, which we have learned before. Let's get reminded of it again. In an expository text, it would be informational, which means full of information. Similar to this reading text, it is full of information about how to keep your city green, how to prevent pollution by following different suggestions or plans or solutions. So Is Your City Green is an informational article. Why? Because it provides facts about a topic and gives reasons why people have made certain choices. Expository articles often include graphic illustrations such as flowcharts, This is a flowchart, and some may feature a sidebar to expand on one aspect of the topic. Here, let's say a specific aspect, a specific subtopic under this topic. I want to focus on it, so I can add a sidebar and add more details about it. So those are the features of the expository genre here, having flowcharts and sidebars to support the information and details about this topic. So the flowcharts are diagrams that show the steps in a process. Here they're showing the steps. Now I will go back to it and show you. It's showing the steps of a specific process, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps presented in a diagram to clearly show it to you. Why is this helpful? Because sometimes when you're reading the words in a text, you wouldn't understand. So this diagram would show you visually how it happens, and it is helpful. Now